The smell hit Caleb Voss before he even opened the door. Unwashed bodies, desperation, and the sour tang of whiskey spilled on floorboards that hadn't seen a mop in months. He stood outside the trading post for a long moment, one gloved hand on the doorframe, seriously considering turning his horse around and riding back into the Montana darkness. "You coming in, or are you going to stand there all night looking constipated?" Caleb glanced sideways. Dutch Morrison leaned against the hitching post, picking his teeth with a splinter of wood. The old trader's face looked like leather someone had left out in the rain too long. "Might be smarter to leave," Caleb said. "Probably." Dutch spat into the dirt. "But you rode 60 miles in the dark to get here, so I figure you're past smart." Caleb pushed through the door without answering. The room fell quiet the way rooms do when someone walks in carrying their reputation like a loaded gun. 20-odd men turned to look, their conversations dying mid-sentence. In the far corner, a dozen women stood in a ragged line against the wall, and they turned too, some hopeful, some terrified, all desperate. Caleb hated every single thing about this. He'd built an empire spanning 3 counties, owned more land than some eastern states, had cattle operations, timber contracts, and enough money to buy most towns twice over. And here he was, at a goddamn bride auction in a backwater trading post that smelled like failure, because apparently wealth couldn't fix the one problem that actually mattered. He had no heir, no family, no reason for any of it to continue past his own bitter existence. "Voss?" A heavy-set man with mutton chops pushed through the crowd, hand extended. "Didn't think you'd actually show." Caleb ignored the hand. "Let's get this over with." The man, Hutchins, some kind of territory official who'd sent the letter, cleared his throat and gestured toward the women. "Right, well, as I mentioned in my correspondence, these are all ladies of varying circumstances, looking for fresh starts, good Christian women seeking honest marriage." "You mean desperate women you're selling like livestock," Caleb said flatly. Hutchins' smile tightened. "I prefer to think of it as facilitating advantageous arrangements. I don't care what you call it. Start talking." The next 20 minutes were possibly the most degrading thing Caleb had ever witnessed, and he'd seen men trampled by stampedes. Hutchins walked down the line like he was selling horses, rattling off each woman's age, background, skills. Good cook, strong back, came from a farming family, lost her husband to fever. Father gambled away the homestead, brother drank himself to death. Every story the same underneath, life had broken them, and this was the last door still open. The bidding was worse. Men shouted numbers like they were buying equipment. $20 for the blacksmith's daughter, $50 for the pretty one from St. Louis, $100 for the widow who could supposedly birth children like a factory. Caleb bid on none of them. He just stood there with his arms crossed, watching the whole sick business, wondering what the hell he'd been thinking riding out here in the first place. Then Hutchins reached the end of the line. "And this here is Naomi Hale, 31 years old, widowed, can read and write, which is more than most can say. Worked as—" "Get on with it," someone shouted. "What's wrong with her?" Hutchins hesitated, which told Caleb everything he needed to know. "Nothing's wrong with her," Hutchins said, but his voice had lost its salesman polish. "She's had some difficulties. Previous marriage was—" "She's barren," a voice called from the back. Laughter rippled through the room. "Everyone knows it. Married 8 years, not a single baby." Caleb looked at the woman properly for the first time. She didn't look broken. She should have. They all did, standing there being evaluated like breeding stock. But something in the way she held herself suggested she'd left broken behind and arrived at something harder. Thinner than fashionable. Face too angular to be pretty by the standards of men who bought wives at auctions. Dark hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. And eyes that didn't beg, didn't plead, didn't do anything except look straight back at whoever was looking at her. "That true?" Caleb asked. Naomi Hale met his gaze directly. "My previous husband and I were married from 1892 to 1900. No children. Make of that what you will." Her voice carried across the room, not loud, not trying to convince anyone of anything, just stating facts. "So yes, she's damaged goods," Hutchins said, trying to salvage his pitch. "But she's educated, I can speak for myself." Naomi cut him off without raising her voice. "I'm 31. I've been married before. It didn't work out. I can manage a household, keep accounts, read medical texts, and break a horse if necessary. I don't drink. I don't complain. I don't expect romance or kindness or anything except honesty." The room had gone quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet than when Caleb entered. This was the silence of men who didn't quite know how to handle a woman who refused to play the part they'd written for her. "You saying you're barren?" someone asked. "I'm saying I was married 8 years and didn't have children. You can draw your own conclusions." "Then why the hell would anyone bid on you?" Naomi's expression didn't change. "That's an excellent question." More laughter, but uglier now. Someone muttered something about charity cases. Another voice suggested they move on to the actual wives. Hutchins looked increasingly uncomfortable, clearly regretting including her in the lineup. Caleb studied her. She wasn't begging, wasn't even trying to sell herself, just standing there like she'd already accepted whatever came next and decided it didn't matter enough to put on a show. He recognized that look. He'd seen it in his own mirror for the past 5 years. "You need an heir?" someone near Caleb said. "That one won't give you any." "Probably why she's still standing there," another man added. "Nobody wants—" $1, Caleb said. The room went dead silent. Hutchins blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" $1. For Naomi Hale. The silence stretched for 3 seconds, then erupted into chaos. Men laughing, shouting, asking if this was a joke. Hutchins looking between Caleb and Naomi like he'd missed something crucial. The other women staring with expressions ranging from pity to relief that it wasn't them. Naomi Hale just looked at Caleb like she was trying to figure out what the angle was. "Mr. Voss," Hutchins said carefully, "if this is some kind of, the minimum bid is supposed to be—" "You're selling human beings," Caleb said. "You want to argue about price?" Hutchins opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "I suppose there's no official minimum, but $1 is insulting," a man near the door said. "That's not even a real bid." "That's exactly the point." Caleb pulled a silver dollar from his pocket and flipped it to Hutchins, who caught it reflexively. "I'm not bidding on her. I'm proving how goddamn stupid this whole thing is. You can't put a price on a person." More shouting. Someone called him a hypocrite. He'd just named a price, hadn't he? Someone else said he was making a mockery of the whole process. A third voice suggested he was either the most charitable man in Montana or the biggest fool. Hutchins looked at the coin in his palm like it might bite him. "Mr. Voss, I don't think— Does she accept or not?" Caleb kept his eyes on Naomi. "That's all that matters." Every person in the room turned to look at her. Naomi Hale stood very still for a long moment. Her expression gave away absolutely nothing. No gratitude, no anger, no fear, no relief. She could have been considering a business contract for all the emotion she showed. Finally, she spoke. "What are you actually offering?" "Not yes, not thank you. Just a question, sharp and direct." Caleb almost smiled. Almost. "Marriage," he said, "legal and binding. You come to my ranch, you run the household, you don't interfere with my business. I provide protection, shelter, and financial security. No romance, no expectations beyond basic partnership. If you can't have children, I don't care. If you can, fine. Either way, you won't starve and you won't be here." "That's it?" "That's it." She was quiet again, thinking. The whole room waited. "And if I say no?" "Then you say no. The dollar was already a gift to prove a point. You don't owe me anything." Another long pause. Someone coughed. Someone else shifted their weight, floorboards creaking. "I accept," Naomi said. Just like that. No tears, no dramatic declaration, no falling into his arms with gratitude. She said it the way someone agrees to a job offer, practical, straightforward, already thinking about what comes next. Hutchins looked like he wanted to object but couldn't figure out how. "This is highly irregular. Get a preacher," Caleb said. "We'll do this legal. Now it's nearly midnight. Then wake someone up." It took 45 minutes to round up a tired-looking circuit preacher who smelled like he'd been sleeping in a stable. The ceremony lasted maybe 3 minutes. Caleb and Naomi stood in front of the man, exchanged vows that meant everything and nothing, and became legally bound to each other while a room full of drunk strangers watched like it was theater. When the preacher asked if Caleb had a ring, he said no. When asked if he wanted to kiss his bride, he said no to that too. Naomi didn't seem to care either way. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the preacher said with all the enthusiasm of someone reading a grocery list. May May you find happiness together. Nobody clapped. A few men were still laughing. Most just looked confused about what they'd witnessed. Caleb turned to his new wife. You have anything you need to collect? Naomi picked up a small canvas bag from near her feet. This is everything. Then let's go. They walked out together without looking back. Behind them, the auction resumed. Someone was already bidding on the next woman, life moving forward like they'd never been there at all. Outside, the Montana night was cold and clear. Stars spread across the sky like spilled salt. Caleb's horse stood where he'd left it, and he untied the reins without saying anything. I can ride, Naomi said. Didn't ask if you could. Most men would assume. I don't care what most men assume. He swung into the saddle, then extended his hand down. But we've got 60 miles to cover before sunrise, and I've only got one horse. You can ride behind or walk. Your choice. She took his hand. Her grip was stronger than expected, fingers calloused from work. She pulled herself up behind him with the efficiency of someone who'd done it before, settling into the saddle like she belonged there. Caleb kicked the horse into motion. They rode in silence for the first hour. The trading post fell away behind them, swallowed by darkness and distance. The land opened up, rolling hills, scattered trees, the kind of emptiness that either freed you or drove you insane depending on what you brought to it. Why? Naomi asked eventually. Why what? Why me? Why $1? Why any of this? Caleb didn't answer immediately. The horse's hooves beat a steady rhythm against hard ground. Wind carried the smell of sage and distant rain. I needed a wife, he said finally. Not a love match, not a fairy tale, just someone who could run a household and wouldn't expect me to pretend to be something I'm not. You could have bid on any of them. Some of those women were young, pretty, fertile. I don't give a damn about pretty, and I don't need children desperately enough to buy some terrified girl and pretend it's a marriage. But you need them enough to marry a stranger. I need an heir, Caleb said, or I needed to stop lying to myself about needing one. Either way, I'm 43 years old, and I'm tired of people asking why I don't have a family. So you married the one woman in that room who probably can't give you children. I married the one woman in that room who wasn't trying to sell me a fantasy. He glanced back at her. You didn't promise to be grateful. You didn't promise to be dutiful. You didn't promise anything except honesty. That's worth more than youth or beauty or fertility. Naomi was quiet for a moment. You might regret that reasoning. Might, but I've regretted plenty of things that looked smarter on paper. They rode another mile before she spoke again. I won't pretend to love you. Good. I won't be meek or submissive or any of the things wives are supposed to be. Don't care. And if you expect me to be grateful for being rescued, you're going to be disappointed. Caleb actually smiled at that, though she couldn't see it in the dark. I didn't rescue you. I made a business arrangement. You needed security. I needed something other than an empty house and a legacy that dies with me. We both got what we needed. Nobody rescued anybody. Fair enough. The sky was starting to lighten in the east when they finally reached Voss Ranch. Naomi's first view of her new home came in shades of gray and blue. The big house sitting on a rise, barns and outbuildings spread below it, fences stretching toward the horizon. Even in pre-dawn dimness, the scale was obvious. This wasn't a homestead. This was an empire. Jesus, Naomi said quietly. It's bigger than it needs to be, Caleb said. I kept building because I didn't know what else to do with the money. He helped her down from the horse, and they stood there in the yard while the world slowly came into focus around them. A rooster crowed. Somewhere a door banged. The smell of wood smoke drifted from one of the bunkhouses. People are going to talk, Naomi said. When they find out you married the Barren widow from the auction, people already talk. I stopped caring years ago. They'll say I trapped you, that I'm after your money. Let them. She turned to look at him directly, her face tired but her eyes sharp. You really don't care what anyone thinks, do you? Not even a little bit. Good. She picked up her bag. Because I stopped carrying around the same time I stopped pretending my first marriage was something other than a slow death. Caleb studied her in the growing light. She looked exhausted. Of course she did. They'd ridden all night. But there was something else there too. A kind of hardness that came from surviving things that should have broken you. He recognized it because he carried the same thing. The housekeeper's room is on the first floor, he said. It's yours. I don't expect you to share my bed unless you want to, and I'm guessing you don't. You're guessing right. Food's at 6, noon, and 6. You're in charge of the household staff. There's a cook, 2 cleaning girls, and a man who handles repairs. They answer to you now. Questions? Hundreds, but they can wait until I've slept. Fair enough. He started to turn away, then stopped. Naomi? What? Welcome to the ranch. She almost smiled. Almost. We'll see if I'm still welcome once you figure out what you actually married. Then she walked into the house, leaving Caleb standing alone in the yard as the sun finally broke over the eastern hills, painting his empire in shades of gold that made it look like something worth having. The house woke up around 7, and it woke up confused. Caleb heard the whispers before he made it downstairs. The cook and the cleaning girls in the kitchen, voices low but urgent. He paused on the landing, listening. Just walked in like she owned the place. Said Mr. Voss married her. At an auction, I heard. Bet she trapped him somehow. Caleb walked into the kitchen. All 3 women went silent and turned to face him with expressions ranging from guilty to terrified. Her name is Naomi Voss, he said. She's my wife. She runs this house now. You have questions, you ask her. You have problems, you bring them to her. You gossip about her. You can pack your things and be off my property by sunset. Are we clear? 3 rapid nods. Good. Where is she? Still sleeping, sir, the cook said quickly. I know where. Let her rest. When she wakes up, one of you show her around properly. He left before they could respond, heading out to the barns where at least the work made sense, and nobody cared who he'd married. But the whispers followed him. They always did. By noon, every person on the ranch knew Caleb Voss had ridden out in the middle of the night and come back with a wife nobody had ever heard of. By evening, the rumors were multiplying like rabbits. She was pregnant with another man's child. She was running from the law. She'd seduced him somehow. She was a con artist. She was a saint. She was a witch. The truth, Caleb thought as he worked through his 3rd hour of contract reviews, was probably more boring than any of the stories. A knock on his office door interrupted his thoughts. Come in. Naomi entered looking considerably more rested but still wearing the same plain dress from last night. She closed the door behind her and stood there surveying the room, massive desk, walls lined with ledgers and maps, a window overlooking the entire ranch. This is where you hide, she said. This is where I work. Same thing, isn't it? Caleb set down his pen. Something you need? Information. She crossed to the desk and picked up one of the ledgers, flipping through it. How many people work here? Depends on the season. Right now, about 40. How many in the house? 4, including the cook you already met. And they all think I'm either a gold digger or a lunatic. Probably both. She set the ledger down. Do you care? No? Do you? Not particularly. She pulled out the chair across from his desk and sat down without being invited. But I need to know what I'm working with. You said I run the household. What does that actually mean? For the next hour, Caleb outlined the structure of his operation. The main house, the staff, the finances allocated to household expenses, the suppliers they used, the systems, or lack thereof, that currently kept things running. Naomi listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes in a small book she'd produced from somewhere. When he finished, she sat back and looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. This place is a disaster, she said. Excuse me? Your household accounts are a disaster. You're paying twice what you should for basic supplies because nobody's tracking purchases. Your staffing makes no sense. You've got 2 girls doing the same cleaning work while your cook is handling repairs that should be someone else's job. And based on what I saw this morning, nobody's actually managing any of it. They're just showing up and doing whatever seems necessary. Caleb felt his jaw tighten. The ranch runs fine. The ranch runs despite your household management, not because of it. You're hemorrhaging money on inefficiency, and you don't even notice because you're too busy with everything else. If you're here to insult, I'm here to fix it. She leaned forward. You married me to run your household. Let me actually run it. Give me full authority over staff, supplies, and household finances. I'll cut your costs by 1/3 and double your efficiency within 6 months. That's a bold claim. It's an accurate assessment. Your last housekeeper, assuming you had one, either didn't care or didn't know what she was doing. Either way, you need someone who does both. Caleb studied her. She wasn't angry, wasn't emotional, just stating facts the way someone points out that a fence needs mending or a roof needs patching. And if I say no, then you wasted $1 on a wife who'll spend her days being useless and miserable while your house continues falling apart around you. Your choice. He almost laughed. Almost. You don't waste words, do you? I told you I don't expect romance. That includes romantic conversation. You want me to run your household? I'll run it. You want me to sit quietly and be decorative? You should have bid on someone else. I don't want decorative. Good. Then get out of my way and let me work. Caleb made his decision in about 5 seconds. He opened a drawer, pulled out a checkbook and a ring of keys, and slid both across the desk. Household account is at First Bank of Helena. There's currently $800 in it. That should last you 2 months if you're careful. These keys open every room in the house, the storage sheds, and the supply cabinets. You hire, you fire, you purchase, you manage. I don't want reports unless something's actually wrong. Naomi picked up the keys, weighing them in her hand like she was weighing the responsibility that came with them. Just like that? Just like that. You said you wanted honesty. Here it is. I don't have time to manage a household and run a ranch that spans 3 counties. I need someone I can trust to handle one so I can focus on the other. If you can do what you say you can do, you'll have more authority in this house than most wives dream of. If you fail, we'll both know within 6 months and can adjust accordingly. And if I succeed, then we'll have proven that a $1 marriage can work better than most $1,000 ones. She almost smiled again. Still didn't quite get there, but it was closer than before. I'll start with the kitchen, she said, standing. Your cook has been buying produce from a supplier in Helena when there's a farm 6 miles from here selling the same thing for half the price. How do you know that? I asked her where she shops, then asked why. She didn't have a good answer. Naomi headed for the door, then paused with her hand on the knob. Caleb? It was the first time she'd used his name. What? I know why you bid on me. You wanted someone who wouldn't expect you to be something you're not. But you should know, I'm going to push you anyway, not to change you, just to make sure you're actually as honest as you claim to be. Push all you want, I'll push back. Good. She left, closing the door quietly behind her. Caleb sat alone in his office, staring at the closed door, wondering what exactly he'd just set in motion. Outside his window, the ranch continued its daily rhythm. Horses in the paddock, men working the fences, cattle moving across distant hills. An empire he'd built from nothing, maintained through ruthlessness and calculation, and refusing to trust anyone enough to let them matter. And now there was a woman in his house who'd just taken his keys and his checkbook and walked out with more access to his life than anyone had been given in years. He should probably be worried. Instead, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Curious. Comes. 3 weeks later, Caleb walked into his own kitchen and didn't recognize it. The room still had the same walls, same stove, same basic layout. But everything else had changed. The windows were actually clean. The counters were organized. There were fresh herbs growing in pots on the windowsill. The floor didn't stick to his boots. And Naomi was there, sleeves rolled up, having what looked like an intense conversation with the cook about flour suppliers. Can get the same quality for 8 cents less per pound if we buy directly from the mill, Naomi was saying, which means we save roughly $12 per month, or $144 per year, which is more than my annual salary, the cook finished, clearly having heard this math before. I know, Mrs. Voss. So why are we still buying from... Naomi noticed Caleb and straightened. Did you need something? It's my kitchen. It's my kitchen. You just own the building. The cook looked between them nervously, clearly expecting an explosion. Caleb had fired people for less attitude than Naomi just gave him. Instead, he felt that same curious feeling from 3 weeks ago. Fair enough, he said. Carry on. He turned to leave, but Naomi's voice stopped him. Actually, since you're here, we need to talk about your staffing. What about it? You've got 2 men working the barns who should be working the fences, and 3 men working the fences who should be working the barns. They're in the wrong positions based on their actual skills. And you know this how? I asked them. Turns out if you actually talk to people about what they're good at, you learn interesting things. Caleb crossed his arms. You've been here 3 weeks and you're telling me how to run my operation? I'm telling you that your barn manager is afraid of horses, your fence supervisor can't dig post holes without throwing out his back, and you've got a ranch hand mucking stalls who used to run a blacksmith shop in Missouri. Yes, I'm telling you how to run your operation, because right now you're running it badly. The cook had gone very still, probably expecting Caleb to explode for real this time. He didn't. My barn manager is afraid of horses, he said slowly. Terrified. Has been for 6 years, apparently, ever since one kicked him in the head. He's been hiding it because he needs the job. And you found this out by talking to him like a human being instead of a work unit. Naomi wiped her hands on her apron. Look, you hired me to run the household, but the household doesn't exist separate from the ranch. Your staff lives here, eats here, gets paid from your accounts. If half your operation is inefficient, it affects everything. I'm not trying to take over your business. I'm trying to make sure the foundation under it isn't rotting. Caleb stared at her. She stared back, completely unflinching. Where's the ranch hand who used to run the blacksmith shop? He asked. Mucking stalls in barn 3. Send him to my office in an hour and tell the barn manager he's being reassigned to fence work before he gets himself killed. Already did. He starts Monday. Of course you did. Caleb shook his head. Anything else you've reorganized without telling me? Quite a bit, actually. But most of it you won't notice unless you're looking for problems, and you'll stop finding as many problems, so I'd call that success. She turned back to her conversation with the cook, effectively dismissing him from his own kitchen. Caleb left, headed back to his office, and tried to figure out when exactly he'd stop being the only person running his empire. The answer, he realized, was probably the moment he'd said $1 and meant it. That night, for the first time in months, he ate dinner that didn't taste like punishment. The cook had somehow improved, or Naomi had bullied her into trying harder, or maybe it was just that the kitchen actually functioned now and food cooked properly. Naomi sat across from him, not at his side like a traditional wife, but across the table like a business partner. They ate in silence for several minutes before she spoke. The staff thinks I'm making you weak. Caleb looked up from his plate. What? They think you're letting me push you around, that you used to be feared and respected, and now you're just letting your wife reorganize everything. What do you think? I think they're confusing strength with stubbornness. She took a sip of water. You're smart enough to recognize when someone has a good idea, even if it's not your idea. That's not weakness. That's intelligence. Most men wouldn't see it that way. Most men are idiots. Caleb almost choked on his food. When he recovered, Naomi was watching him with that same unreadable expression she'd worn the night they met. You don't hold back, do you? He said. You told me you wanted honesty. I'm giving it to you. I'm starting to realize there's a difference between honesty and bluntness. Is there? Seems like the same thing to me. They finished eating in silence, but it was a different kind of silence than when they started. More comfortable somehow. Like they were beginning to figure out how this strange arrangement might actually work. Later, after Naomi had gone to her room and the house had settled into nighttime quiet, Caleb sat in his office with the day's ledgers spread in front of him. Household expenses were down. Staff efficiency was up. Problems he'd been dealing with for months had simply stopped being problems. And in his kitchen, there were herbs growing in pots. He didn't know what to do with any of it. All he knew was that the woman he'd married for $1 was turning out to be worth considerably more than that, and he had no idea whether that made him smart or the biggest fool in Montana. Time would tell. The winter came early that year, arriving in October with snow that didn't melt and temperatures that made the horse's breath hang in the air like ghosts. Caleb had seen harder winters, but something about this one felt different. Maybe because, for the first time in years, he wasn't facing it alone. Not that Naomi made things easier. If anything, she made everything more complicated. You're doing it wrong, she said, appearing in the barn doorway while Caleb was examining a mare's injured leg. He didn't look up. I've been treating horses since before you were born. Then you've been doing it wrong for a very long time. She crossed to where he crouched, knelt beside him without asking permission, and gently moved his hands away from the swelling. You're pressing too hard. She's favoring this leg because the tendon's inflamed, not torn. Pressure makes it worse. And you know this how? My father bred horses before he drank away the farm. I grew up in barns. Her fingers moved over the mare's leg with practiced efficiency. This needs cold compress and rest. Not whatever you were about to do. Caleb sat back on his heels, watching her work. 3 months into their marriage, and he still couldn't predict what would come out of her mouth or where she'd appear next. The household ran like clockwork now. He'd give her that. But she hadn't stopped there. She'd started wandering the ranch, talking to workers, examining operations, offering opinions nobody asked for. The men hated it. The foreman had complained twice. Even Dutch Morrison, who stopped by occasionally, had pulled Caleb aside last week to suggest he get his woman under control before she causes real problems. Caleb had told Dutch to mind his own business. There, Naomi said, straightening. Keep her in the near paddock for a week. Light movement only. She'll be fine. Anything else you want to reorganize while you're out here? She looked at him, and he couldn't tell if she was annoyed or amused. With Naomi, it was often both. Your breeding program is a mess, she said. You're pairing bloodlines that don't complement each other. You could improve your stock quality by 30% with better selection. I built the most successful horse operation in 3 counties. You've built a profitable operation. Successful and profitable aren't the same thing. She brushed hay off her skirt. But what do I know? I'm just the wife who was supposed to stay in the kitchen. She walked out before he could respond, leaving him alone with the mare and the uncomfortable feeling that she might be right. That night at dinner, Caleb decided to push back. The foreman says you've been questioning his decisions about winter feed rotation. Naomi didn't look up from her plate. The foreman is rotating feed in a pattern that wastes 20% of your hay stores. I asked him why. He didn't have a good answer. He's been managing feed for 15 years. Then he's been wasting your hay for 15 years. Length of service doesn't equal competence. You've been here 4 months. And in 4 months, I've saved you more money than your foreman has in the past year. Do you want me to stop asking questions, or do you want to keep pretending that longevity matters more than results? Caleb set down his fork. You're making enemies. I know. That doesn't bother you? Should it? She finally looked at him. You married me because I don't pretend. I'm not going to start now just because it makes people uncomfortable. There's a difference between honesty and antagonizing my entire operation. Is there? She leaned back in her chair. Because from where I'm sitting, the only people I'm antagonizing are the ones who've gotten comfortable doing mediocre work. The good workers appreciate someone finally noticing what they contribute. The lazy ones want me gone. If that makes me antagonistic, I'll wear it. You're my wife, not my business partner. The words came out harsher than he intended, and he saw something flicker across her face. Not hurt exactly, but something close to it. Right, she said quietly. I forgot. She stood, left her half-finished dinner on the table, and walked out without another word. Caleb sat alone in the dining room, feeling like he'd just lost an argument he didn't know he was having. The next morning, Naomi was back to running the household with the same ruthless efficiency as always, but something had shifted. She was polite, professional, distant in a way she hadn't been before. It drove Caleb crazy. A week passed, then 2. The winter deepened, snow piling up until the ranch felt cut off from the rest of the world. Supply runs became difficult, then impossible. They were isolated. Just the ranch, the staff, and a marriage that had somehow become colder than the Montana winter. Caleb told himself he didn't care. He had work. The ranch kept running. Naomi kept the household functioning. That was all that mattered. But he kept finding himself watching her across rooms, wondering what she was thinking, annoyed that he cared. Then the blizzard hit. It started on a Tuesday afternoon, light snow that turned serious by evening and became deadly by midnight. Wind howled around the house, shaking windows and finding every crack in the walls. By Wednesday morning, snow had drifted 8 feet high in places, and visibility extended maybe 20 yards. We've got 3 men trapped in the far bunkhouse, the foreman reported, standing in Caleb's office, dripping melted snow. Tried to reach them this morning, couldn't get through. Doors blocked on their side. How much food do they have? Maybe 2 days if they're careful. What about the livestock in the north pasture? Haven't been able to check. Can't get the barn doors open with the drifts. Caleb looked out the window at white nothing. Get every available man working on clearing paths. Priority is the trapped workers, then the barns. You'll freeze to death if you go out there, Naomi said from the doorway. Both men turned. She stood there in a heavy coat, wool scarf wrapped around her neck, looking like she was already dressed to head into the storm. This isn't your concern, Caleb said. 3 men are trapped, and you're about to do something stupid to save them. That makes it my concern. She looked at the foreman. How many men do we have available? Mrs. Voss, I don't think... How many? The foreman glanced at Caleb, who nodded grudgingly. 12 who can work. Rest are sick or injured from the cold. Not enough to clear paths and handle the livestock. Naomi crossed to the desk and grabbed a piece of paper, sketching quickly. We need to prioritize. The trapped men have 2 days of food. The livestock will die tonight without shelter and feed, which means we handle the animals first. We're not leaving men trapped, Caleb said. I'm not suggesting we do. I'm saying we split the crew. 6 men on animal rescue, 6 on clearing the path to the bunkhouse. We work both problems simultaneously instead of sequentially. We don't have enough manpower. What? You have me. She looked at him directly. I can handle horses. Put me with the livestock crew. Absolutely not. Why? Because I'm a woman? Because it's dangerous. So is sitting here while animals die and men slowly starve. She pulled on her gloves. You don't have enough people, Caleb. You need me whether you want to admit it or not. The foreman looked between them, clearly wishing he was anywhere else. Caleb wanted to refuse, wanted to order her back inside where it was safe. But she was right. They didn't have enough men, and she knew horses better than half his crew. You stay with the group, he said finally. You don't go off alone. You do exactly what the crew chief says, and if it gets too dangerous, you come back. Same goes for you. I'm not... If I have to follow orders, so do you. Fair's fair. He almost smiled despite everything. Deal. The next 6 hours were brutal. Caleb led the crew trying to reach the trapped men, digging through snow that kept filling back in as fast as they cleared it. His hands went numb even through gloves. His face felt like frozen leather, but they kept digging, kept pushing, until finally they broke through and found 3 very cold, very grateful ranch hands who'd been rationing hardtack and melted snow. When he got back to the main house, exhausted and half frozen, he found Naomi in the kitchen directing the cook and both cleaning girls and preparing hot food for workers coming in from the cold. She'd changed clothes, but her hair was still damp, her face windburned, her hands wrapped in bandages. What happened to your hands? He asked. She didn't look up from the pot she was stirring. Rope burns. We had to drag 2 horses out of a collapsed shelter. They're alive, though, both of them. I should have stayed inside and let them die. Now she looked at him. We saved 16 horses, got the rest into shelter, and distributed enough feed to last 3 days. Your crew is good, Caleb. They just needed someone coordinating instead of everyone doing whatever seemed urgent. She went back to stirring, effectively ending the conversation. Caleb stood there, covered in snow, exhausted, and completely unable to figure out this woman he'd married. Thank you, he said finally. Naomi paused. For what? For helping. For not staying inside like I wanted you to. You're welcome. She handed the spoon to the cook. Now go change before you get frostbite. You look half dead. You look worse. Good thing neither of us married for appearance then. This time he did smile. The blizzard lasted 3 more days. By the time it ended, the ranch had lost some livestock, but saved most. All the workers survived. The operation kept functioning despite conditions that should have crippled it, and Caleb found himself having dinner conversations with his wife that didn't end in one of them walking out. The breeding program really is a mess, he said one night, refilling her glass. Naomi looked up, surprised. What? You were right. I've been pairing for profit, not quality. If you've got suggestions, I'll listen. Why the change of heart? Because you saved 16 horses while I was digging through snow. And because I'm tired of pretending you don't know what you're talking about, just because it's easier than admitting you might be smarter than me about some things. She was quiet for a long moment. I'm not smarter than you. No. But you're smarter about different things. And I've been too stubborn to use that. He set down the bottle. I told you that you weren't my business partner. That was stupid. It was honest. It was both. I married you thinking I needed a housekeeper. Turns out I got something a lot more valuable. What's that? Someone who gives a damn about this place enough to argue with me about it. Naomi smiled, an actual, genuine smile that transformed her entire face. It was maybe the 3rd time he'd seen it, and it hit him harder than expected. "Don't get used to me being agreeable," she said. "Wouldn't dream of it." They talked until midnight about bloodlines and breeding strategy, about which of his current stock had potential and which should be sold off. Naomi sketched pairings on paper, explaining genetics in a way that actually made sense. Caleb listened, asked questions, pushed back when he disagreed. It felt like the first real conversation they'd had since the night they met. When Naomi finally went to her room, Caleb sat alone in his office thinking about the strange direction his life had taken. He'd bought a wife for $1, thinking he'd solved a problem. Instead, he'd apparently married the most aggravating, capable, impossible woman in Montana. He had no idea what to do with that information. January brought a thaw. The snow melted, paths reopened, and supply wagons started making it through again. The ranch emerged from isolation like a bear from hibernation, damaged in places but fundamentally intact. And Caleb noticed something strange. His workers had stopped complaining about Naomi. Not all of them. The foreman still grumbled, and a few of the older hands clearly resented taking direction from a woman. But the majority had shifted from hostile to grudgingly respectful. He asked one of the crew chiefs about it. "She pulled her weight during the blizzard," the man said with a shrug. "Worked as hard as anyone, didn't complain, knew her business with the horses. Hard to argue with that." "But she's still pushing changes." "Yeah, but they're good changes. My crew's working smarter, not just harder, and she listens when we push back. It's not just her way or nothing. She's—" He paused, searching for words. "She's fair. More fair than some men I've worked for." Caleb filed that information away and kept watching. What he saw was a woman who'd somehow figured out how to navigate a world designed to exclude her. She didn't fight every battle, didn't try to prove herself on everything. Instead, she picked the fights that mattered, made alliances with people willing to listen, and proved her value through results instead of arguments. It was smarter than anything Caleb would have done in her position. February arrived with Valentine's Day, which Caleb had forgotten existed until one of the cleaning girls mentioned it. He had no idea if he was supposed to do something. He'd never been married on Valentine's Day before. His relationship with Naomi didn't exactly scream romance. He decided to ignore it. Naomi, apparently, had the same idea. They ate dinner in companionable silence, discussed a feed supplier contract, and went their separate ways afterward like it was any other night. Caleb told himself he was relieved, but later, alone in his office, he found himself thinking about the fact that his wife was sleeping alone in a room down the hall. Had been sleeping alone for 6 months. Would probably continue sleeping alone because that's what they'd agreed to. It was what he wanted, wasn't it? He shoved the thoughts aside and focused on work. March came in cold and left warm, the world turning green almost overnight. The ranch shook off winter and returned to full operation. Caleb threw himself into spring work, fence repairs, cattle drives, contract negotiations with buyers from back east. He was in Helena finalizing a timber deal when Dutch Morrison found him in a saloon and slid into the chair across from him. "Heard an interesting rumor," Dutch said. "Don't care." "You're going to care about this one." Dutch leaned forward. "Word is your wife is running the whole operation now, that you've gone soft, letting a woman tell you how to manage your own ranch." Caleb looked up from his drink. And people are starting to wonder if Caleb Voss has lost his edge. Some of your competitors are getting ideas. Let them get ideas. I'll handle it when it becomes a problem. It's already a problem. James Garrett's been sniffing around your timber contracts. The Hutchins family is trying to undercut your beef prices with the eastern buyers. They think you're distracted. They're wrong. Are they? Dutch studied him. Because from where I'm sitting, you've changed. Used to be you'd crush anyone who looked at your business sideways. Now you're delegating. Delegating isn't weakness. Didn't say it was. But it's different. And different makes people nervous, he paused. Especially when the person you're delegating to is a woman from a bride auction that half the territory still thinks trapped you somehow. Caleb set down his glass very carefully. You implying something? I'm saying your wife has enemies, and those enemies are going to come for her eventually, which means they're coming for you. Let them try. You care about her. It wasn't a question. Caleb didn't answer immediately. Did he care about Naomi? 6 months ago, the answer would have been simple. No, she was a business arrangement. Now, she's my wife, he said finally. That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're getting. Dutch smiled. Fair enough. Just watch your back. And hers. The conversation stuck with Caleb on the long ride home. He'd known there would be pushback to Naomi's involvement in ranch operations, but he'd underestimated how much people hated seeing a woman succeed in a man's world, and he definitely underestimated how much that hatred would bother him. He got back to the ranch after dark, tired from 2 days of riding. The house was quiet except for lamplight coming from the kitchen. He found Naomi there, sitting at the table with ledgers spread around her, making notes by candlelight. "You're up late," he said. She glanced up. "So are you. How was Helena?" "Productive. Signed the timber contract." "Good." She went back to her notes. Caleb pulled out a chair and sat down. "Dutch says you have enemies." Her pen paused. "Dutch talks too much." "Is he right?" Naomi set down the pen and looked at him directly. "Of course I have enemies. I'm a woman with authority in a world that thinks women should have none. Every decision I make threatens someone who believes I shouldn't be making decisions at all. That doesn't concern you?" "It concerns me greatly, but hiding won't make them go away and stepping back won't satisfy them. They don't want me to be less involved. They want me to not exist." "So what do you do?" "I keep working, keep proving myself, keep being too valuable to dismiss." She leaned back. "Why? You having second thoughts about giving me authority?" "No." "Then why bring it up?" "Good question. Why did he bring it up?" "Because Dutch is right about one thing," Caleb said. "If they come for you, they're coming for me too, and I need to know you're ready for that." Naomi smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. "I've been ready for that since the night you bid $1 for me. The question is whether you're ready. Because when they attack, they're not going to attack my competence. They're going to attack your judgment in trusting me, your reputation, your strength. Let them. You say that now. But when it actually happens, when people you've done business with for years start questioning whether you've lost your edge, whether your wife has too much influence, whether you're thinking clearly, it's going to hurt, and you're going to have to decide if I'm worth that damage." Caleb held her gaze. "You think I'll choose them over you? I think you built an empire on being feared and respected. I'm threatening that empire just by existing in it. Eventually, you'll have to choose between maintaining the reputation that built this place and defending the woman who's trying to change it. That's not a choice. It's always a choice." They sat in silence, the weight of unspoken things pressing down on them. Finally, Caleb spoke. "You remember what I said the night we met about not expecting you to be grateful? I remember everything from that night. I meant it then. I mean it now. You don't owe me anything. If you want to step back, reduce your involvement, protect yourself, I won't stop you." Naomi studied him. "That's not what you want, though." "What I want doesn't matter. What's fair matters." "Since when do you care about fair?" "Since I married someone who keeps forcing me to care about things I spent years not caring about." She almost smiled. "You're getting soft, Caleb Voss." "Probably. People will destroy you for it." "Let them try." This time she did smile, sad and genuine and complicated. "You don't know what you're saying." "Yes, I do." He stood. "I'm saying that whatever's coming, we face it together. That's what partners do." He left before she could respond, heading upstairs to his room, his heart beating harder than a simple conversation warranted. Behind him, Naomi sat alone in the kitchen, staring at the ledgers without seeing them. Neither of them slept well that night, and neither of them knew that the war Dutch warned about was already beginning in saloons and meeting halls and private conversations across 3 counties, where men gathered to discuss the problem of Caleb Voss's wife and what should be done about her. But they would find out soon enough. Because the impossible was about to happen, and when it did, it would change everything. April arrived with news that stopped Naomi mid-step in the hallway. She'd been carrying linens to the upstairs closet when the nausea hit, sudden and overwhelming, sending her stumbling into the nearest room. She barely made it to the wash basin before her breakfast came back up. When the retching finally stopped, she stood there gripping the porcelain edge, breathing hard, her mind racing through possibilities she'd stopped allowing herself to consider years ago. It couldn't be. She counted backward. Once. Twice. 3 times, because the numbers didn't make sense. 7 weeks since her last monthly bleeding. 7 weeks of feeling tired, of food tasting wrong, of her breasts aching in a way that had nothing to do with the poorly fitted dresses she'd been wearing. She sat down on the floor, back against the wall, and tried to process what her body was telling her. The Barren woman. That's what they'd called her at the auction. 8 years married to Thomas Hale without a single pregnancy. The town doctor had examined her twice, both times delivering the same verdict with barely concealed contempt. Something was wrong with her womb. She'd never carry a child. Thomas had divorced her for it, called her defective, made sure everyone knew the failure was hers, not his. And she'd believed it, accepted it, built a life around the certainty that children would never be part of her future. Except now her body was doing something it had never done before, and the impossibility of it made her want to laugh and cry and scream all at once. She didn't tell Caleb. Not that day, not the next. She needed to be sure, needed to understand what was happening before she said anything that couldn't be taken back. So she waited, watched her body for confirmation, and tried not to let hope become something that could destroy her. 2 weeks later, there was no denying it anymore. She found Caleb in the barn, examining a new colt that had been born during the night. He looked up when she approached, and something in her expression made him straighten immediately. "What's wrong?" Naomi opened her mouth, closed it, tried again. "I'm pregnant." The words hung in the air between them like something solid. Caleb stared at her. "What?" "I'm pregnant. About 9 weeks, I think." She wrapped her arms around herself. "I know it doesn't make sense. I know what everyone said about me being barren, but I've missed 2 cycles now, and the sickness, and... You're sure?" "As sure as I can be without seeing a doctor." He didn't say anything for a long moment, his face unreadable. Then he turned away, walked a few steps, and stood there with his back to her. Naomi's stomach twisted. "If you think I've been unfaithful, no." He turned around quickly. "No, that's not..." He ran a hand through his hair. "You're really pregnant?" "Yes." "After 8 years of nothing with your first husband?" "Yes." "And you're sure it's..." He stopped himself. "Yours?" She laughed, but it came out bitter. "We've had sex exactly 4 times in 8 months, Caleb. Unless there's another man I'm sneaking around with in my abundant free time, yes, it's yours." His face did something complicated. "I wasn't questioning..." "Yes, you were. It's fine. Everyone else will too." She turned to leave. "I just thought you should know." "Naomi, wait." She stopped but didn't turn around. "This is good news," he said quietly. "Isn't it?" "I don't know what it is." She looked back at him. "You wanted an heir. Apparently I can give you one after all. Congratulations." She walked out before he could see her crying. The next morning, Caleb insisted she see a doctor. Not the local one who'd declared her barren. He hired a specialist from Helena who arrived on the afternoon train and examined her in the privacy of the main house. Naomi sat on the edge of the bed while the doctor prodded and questioned and made thoughtful noises. Caleb paced outside in the hallway like a caged animal. Finally, the doctor emerged. "Well?" Caleb demanded. "Your wife is approximately 10 weeks pregnant. The pregnancy appears healthy, though it's early yet. I'd estimate the baby will arrive in late October or early November." Caleb let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. And her previous, the barrenness, likely wasn't barrenness at all. Sometimes these things take time, or the right circumstances, or simply luck. The human body is mysterious. The doctor closed his bag. "I'll want to see her again in a month. In the meantime, she should rest more, eat well, avoid heavy lifting." After the doctor left, Caleb went to find Naomi. She was in the kitchen, viciously kneading bread dough like it had personally offended her. "You heard?" she asked, without looking up. "I heard. So now everyone knows. By tomorrow, the whole territory will know the Barren auction bride is somehow pregnant. The rumors will be spectacular. Let them talk. Easy for you to say. You're not the one they'll call a liar and a cheat." She punched the dough harder. "They'll say I trapped you, that I was already pregnant when you bid on me, that it's not yours. Then we'll prove them wrong. How? By defending myself to every person who wants to believe the worst? By spending the next 7 months justifying my own pregnancy?" She finally looked at him, eyes bright with unshed tears. "I spent 8 years being called defective, Caleb. 8 years of my husband telling me I was broken, of doctors looking at me like I was less than human because my body wouldn't do what it was supposed to do. and I accepted it. I built a life around being the woman who couldn't have children. And now you can. And now I don't know what I am. Her voice cracked. What if something's wrong with me? What if I lose it? What if... Caleb crossed the kitchen and pulled her into his arms. She went stiff at first. They didn't do this, didn't have this kind of physical comfort between them. But then something in her broke, and she buried her face in his chest and cried. He held her while she shook, one hand stroking her hair, saying nothing because there was nothing to say that would fix the years of pain she'd carried. When she finally pulled away, her face was blotchy, and her eyes were red, and she looked more human than he'd ever seen her. Sorry, she muttered. Don't be. I'm not usually... I know. He wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. But you're allowed to fall apart sometimes. Not very practical. You're allowed to be impractical too. She laughed wetly. Now I know you're lying. But some of the tension had left her shoulders, and when she went back to the bread dough, her movements were gentler. The rumors started within 48 hours, exactly as Naomi predicted. The auction bride was pregnant. Caleb Voss had been trapped. She must have been carrying another man's child all along. Everyone knew she was barren. This proved she was a liar. The marriage was a fraud. Voss had been made a fool. The whispers reached Caleb through a dozen different sources. His suppliers suddenly asked pointed questions about his wife's health. Business associates made jokes that weren't quite jokes. Even some of his own workers started looking at him with something between pity and contempt. He fired 2 of them on the spot and made it clear he'd fire anyone else who had opinions about his wife's pregnancy. But firing workers didn't stop the talk. If anything, it made things worse. Now he was defensive, which meant the rumors must be true. Why else would he react so strongly? Naomi handled it by throwing herself into work with even more intensity than before. She reorganized the horse breeding program like she'd been threatening to do for months, creating detailed records of bloodlines and pairings that made Caleb's previous system look primitive by comparison. She worked 12-hour days despite the doctor's orders to rest. She pushed herself until she was exhausted, until Caleb had to physically stop her from lifting feed sacks and climbing into corrals. You're going to hurt yourself, he said, taking the ledger from her hands one evening. I'm fine. You're not fine. You're trying to prove something to people who already decided what they think. Then what should I do? Sit quietly and let them say whatever they want? You should take care of yourself. Take care of our child. He said it deliberately, watching her face. Nothing else matters. Everything else matters. If I stop working, they'll say I was only valuable when I wasn't pregnant. If I keep working, they'll say I'm neglecting my duties as a wife. There's no winning, Caleb. There's only different ways to lose. Then lose on your own terms. She looked at him for a long moment. When did you get wise? About 10 seconds ago. It'll probably pass. She almost smiled. By June, Naomi was showing enough that hiding the pregnancy became impossible. She wore loose dresses and stopped attending town functions, which only fed the gossip. The wife of a prominent rancher should be proud of her pregnancy, people said. The fact that she was hiding suggested she had something to hide. Then the Hutchins family made their move. James Hutchins, the same man who'd run the auction where Caleb bought Naomi, showed up at the ranch unannounced with 2 other men Caleb recognized as business rivals. We need to talk, Hutchins said. Caleb kept his hand on the door. So talk. Not out here. This is private business. Against his better judgment, Caleb let them in. They settled in his office, 3 men in expensive suits looking at him like he was a problem that needed solving. We're concerned, Hutchins began. About what? About the rumors surrounding your wife? About the legitimacy of her pregnancy? About what that means for your business relationships and standing in the community? Caleb's voice went very quiet. Get out. Now, Voss, we're all friends here. Friends don't show up at my home and question my wife's honor. Get out. One of the other men leaned forward. We're trying to help you. If the child isn't yours, it is mine. You can't know that for certain. She was barren for 8 years, then suddenly pregnant after a few months with you. It's suspicious. Or it's proof that her first husband was the problem, not her. Hutchins made a dismissive gesture. Either way, the optics are bad. People are talking. Your business associates are nervous about being connected to a scandal. We're offering you a way out. A way out of what? The marriage, a quiet annulment based on fraud. You get to preserve your reputation, keep your business intact, and avoid being tied to a woman who's becoming a liability. The room went very still. Caleb stood up slowly. You came into my home to suggest I divorce my pregnant wife. We came to offer you options. Get out. All of you. Now. Voss, be reasonable. I'm being perfectly reasonable. You have 30 seconds to be off my property before I throw you off. They left, muttering about poor judgment and stubbornness. Caleb stood at the window and watched them ride away, his hands clenched so tight his knuckles were white. He found Naomi in the garden behind the house, sitting on a bench in the afternoon sun. She looked up when he approached, taking in his expression. That bad? The Hutchins family thinks I should divorce you. She didn't look surprised. What did you say? I told them to leave. That's not an answer to the question I asked. Caleb sat down beside her. What question did you ask? What did you say about their suggestion? Did you consider it? No. Not even for a second? Not even for half a second. He looked at her. Did you think I would? Naomi was quiet, hands folded over the small swell of her belly. I think you built an empire by making smart business decisions. I think divorcing me might be the smartest decision you could make right now. It would also be the worst. Why? Because you're worth more than my reputation, more than business relationships, more than what anyone in this territory thinks of me. Her eyes got bright. You don't mean that. I've never meant anything more. They sat in silence, the afternoon stretching long and golden around them. Finally, Naomi spoke. The baby moved this morning, just a flutter, but I felt it. Caleb's breath caught. Yeah? Yeah. She took his hand and placed it on her stomach. Probably too early for you to feel anything, but... She stopped because he was looking at her with an expression she'd never seen before, something raw and unguarded and terrified. I don't know how to do this, he said quietly. Do what? Care about something this much. Care about both of you this much. I spent 20 years building walls so high nothing could get through, and you just... He stopped, searching for words. You're tearing them down, and I don't know who I am without them. Naomi turned to face him fully. You're the man who bid $1 on a woman nobody wanted, who gave her authority when everyone said she should have none, who defended her when it would have been easier to abandon her. She touched his face. You're not who you were 20 years ago, Caleb. Thank heaven for that. He kissed her then, really kissed her for the first time since their wedding night. Not out of obligation or biological need, but because he wanted to, because she was crying and smiling at the same time, and he didn't know what else to do with everything he was feeling. When they pulled apart, she laughed. What? He asked. We're terrible at this. At what? Being married, being a couple. All of it. We've done everything backward. Seems to be working anyway. Seems to be. They went inside together, hand in hand, and neither of them noticed the figure watching from the tree line. Someone who'd seen the kiss, who'd witnessed the intimacy, who now had proof that Caleb Voss had gone soft. Information like that was valuable in the right hands. And the right hands were already waiting. July brought heat that made the pregnancy harder. Naomi moved slowly through her days, her body changing in ways that fascinated and terrified her. The baby moved constantly now, little kicks and rolls that Caleb felt whenever he placed his hand on her stomach. They'd fallen into a new rhythm. Naomi still worked, but less. Caleb had taken over more of the horse program himself, implementing her suggestions and discovering she'd been right about nearly everything. The breeding quality improved. Buyers started noticing, which made what happened next all the more devastating. It started with missing horses. 3 of their best breeding stock vanished overnight from the north pasture. Caleb organized search parties, questioned workers, checked every inch of fence line. Nothing. Then a week later, those same horses showed up at a ranch 60 miles away, sold to a buyer who had documentation proving legitimate purchase from Voss Ranch. Documentation Caleb had never signed. It's forgery, he said, staring at the papers the sheriff brought. I never authorized this sale. Papers look legitimate to me, the sheriff said. Got your signature right here. That's not my signature. Looks pretty close. Close isn't the same as real. Caleb threw the papers on his desk. Someone stole my horses and forged my name to cover it up. Or someone at your ranch made the sale without telling you. The sheriff gave him a meaningful look. Heard your wife's been running a lot of the operations lately. Maybe she... Don't finish that sentence. I'm just saying, Voss, you've given her a lot of authority. Maybe she's using it in ways you don't know about. After the sheriff left, Caleb sat alone in his office, staring at the forged signature. It was good. Close enough to his real signature that he could see how someone might be fooled, but he'd spent 20 years signing contracts and documents. He knew his own handwriting. This wasn't it. He showed the papers to Naomi that evening. She studied them carefully, her face pale. This is deliberately designed to implicate me. What? Look at the date. It's from 2 weeks ago, when you were in Helena for 3 days. I was managing the ranch alone. Anyone could claim I authorized this sale while you were gone. Caleb looked at the date. She was right. Whoever did this knows our schedule, Naomi continued. Knows when you travel, knows I have authority to make decisions in your absence. They're setting me up. For what? To destroy my credibility. To prove I'm untrustworthy. To give you a reason to... She stopped. To divorce you, Caleb finished. They looked at each other across the desk, the weight of the trap settling around them. What do we do? Naomi asked. We prove it's forgery. We trace where the horses actually went, find out who really sold them, and expose whoever's behind this. And if we can't prove it, then we fight anyway. But fighting proved harder than expected. The buyer who'd purchased the horses claimed he'd dealt with a representative from Voss Ranch, a man matching the description of one of Caleb's workers, who'd since disappeared. The documentation trail was clean. The forgery was excellent. Without hard proof, it was Caleb's word against official-looking paperwork. The case went to court. The territorial court in Helena was packed the day of the hearing. Everyone wanted to see the mighty Caleb Voss brought down, wanted to watch his auction bride wife get exposed as the fraud they'd always known she was. Naomi sat in the front row, 7 months pregnant, wearing the best dress she owned and looking like she was walking to her own execution. The opposing lawyer was good. He painted a picture of a desperate woman who'd trapped a wealthy rancher, gained his trust, and then started stealing from him. He brought up her history, the failed first marriage, the auction, the suspicious timing of her pregnancy. He made it sound like a long con, carefully executed. And where was Mr. Voss when these horses were sold? The lawyer asked. In Helena, the witness confirmed. And who was managing the ranch in his absence? His wife, ma'am, Mrs. Voss. So Mrs. Voss had both the opportunity and the authority to make this sale. Objection, Caleb's lawyer stood. Speculation. I'm establishing facts, Your Honor. Mrs. Voss was alone in charge with full authority over ranch operations. The sale occurred during this time. These are facts. The judge nodded. Overruled. Continue. It went on for hours. Every piece of Naomi's past was dragged out and examined. Her barrenness that wasn't barrenness, her poverty, her desperation. The $1 marriage that everyone had found so shocking. They made it all sound like evidence of a criminal mind. Naomi sat through it without expression, but Caleb could see her hand shaking in her lap. When it was their turn to present a defense, Caleb's lawyer did his best. He brought in handwriting experts who testified the signature was forged. He showed inconsistencies in the documentation. He proved Naomi had no motive. She had full access to Caleb's money already. Why steal horses? But the opposing lawyer had an answer for everything. Maybe she wanted independence. Maybe she was planning to leave. Maybe the pregnancy was designed to secure her position before she started stealing. The innuendo was devastating. Then the lawyer made his final move. I'd like to call Mrs. Naomi Voss to the stand. The courtroom went silent. Caleb's lawyer objected, but the judge overruled. Naomi was a party to the case. She could be questioned. Naomi stood slowly, one hand on her swollen belly, and walked to the witness stand. Every eye in the room followed her. The lawyer started gentle. Basic questions about her background, her marriage, her role on the ranch. Naomi answered calmly, her voice steady. Then he went for the throat. Mrs. Voss, you were married for 8 years to Thomas Hale without producing a single child, correct? That's correct. In fact, you were examined by multiple doctors who declared you barren. Isn't that true? They said I couldn't have children, yes. And yet here you are, 7 months pregnant after less than a year of marriage to Mr. Voss. How do you explain that? I can't explain it. Bodies are complicated. Or perhaps the simpler explanation is that you were never actually barren. Perhaps you simply didn't conceive with your first husband. That's possible. Or perhaps, the lawyer paused dramatically, the child you're carrying isn't Mr. Voss's at all. The courtroom erupted. The judge banged his gavel. Caleb started to stand, but his lawyer pulled him back down. Naomi just sat there, calm as still water. Do you have any proof of that accusation? She asked quietly. Do you have any proof it's not true? Beyond the fact that I've been faithful to my husband? No, I can't prove biology. But then, you can't disprove it either, can you? You're just throwing accusations and hoping something sticks. I'm establishing that you're not who you claim to be. A barren woman who's suddenly fertile. A pauper who's suddenly wealthy. An auction bride who's somehow become the power behind one of the most successful ranches in Montana. It's all very convenient. Convenient? Naomi leaned forward. You think it's convenient to be called barren for 8 years? To have doctors examine you like livestock and declare you broken? To stand in front of strangers and be sold for $1 because nobody else wanted you? Her voice had risen, emotion finally breaking through. You think it's convenient to spend every single day proving yourself to people who've already decided you're worthless? To work twice as hard for half the credit? To be blamed for every problem and credited for no solutions? She was standing now, hands gripping the railing. I didn't trap Caleb Voss. I saved his operation from falling apart due to years of neglect and mismanagement. I turned profitable into successful. I made his household run efficiently and his breeding program actually work. And you know what I got for it? Hatred. Suspicion. And now I'm standing here 7 months pregnant being accused of fraud by men who can't stand the idea that a woman might actually be good at something. The courtroom was dead silent. So no, Naomi continued, quieter now. I don't have proof this baby is Caleb's beyond my word. But my word has been honest from the day I met him, which is more than most people in this room can say. And if that's not good enough for you, then nothing ever will be. She sat down, breathing hard, her face flushed. The lawyer tried to continue, but he'd lost the room. The judge finally called for a recess. During the break, Caleb found Naomi outside, leaning against the courthouse wall. That was, he started, stupid, emotional, everything I shouldn't have done. Brave, honest, exactly what needed to be said. She looked at him, eyes bright with unshed tears. I think I just made everything worse. Or you just showed everyone who you really are. Let them decide if they can handle it. The verdict came 2 days later. The judge ruled in their favor. The signature was declared forged, the sale invalidated, the horses returned to Voss Ranch. The buyer lost his money and his claim. But it was a hollow victory, because everyone in that courtroom had heard the accusations, had seen Naomi defend herself, had watched Caleb stand by her despite everything. And now they all had opinions about what it meant. The ride home was quiet. Naomi stared out the window, exhausted in a way that went beyond physical. We won, Caleb said. Did we? The judge ruled on the legal question, but everyone in that room still thinks I'm either a liar or a whore or both. We won the case and lost everything else. Caleb didn't have an answer for that. When they got home, Naomi went straight to bed despite the early hour. Caleb stood in the hallway outside her room, listening to her cry through the door, and felt more helpless than he'd ever felt in his life. He'd built an empire, controlled thousands of acres, commanded respect and fear across 3 counties, and he couldn't protect his wife from the one thing that actually mattered, the cruelty of people who would never see her as anything other than the desperate woman from the auction. That night, alone in his office, Caleb made a decision. If they couldn't win by playing by the rules, then he'd change the game entirely. The morning after Caleb made his decision, he called his lawyer to the ranch before sunrise. I want to transfer property, he said without preamble. Marcus Webb, who'd been Caleb's attorney for 15 years, set down his coffee cup. Transfer what property? Half the ranch, the main house. Full partnership in the horse breeding operation. All of it goes into Naomi's name. Webb stared at him like he'd announced plans to burn down Helena. You want to give your wife, a woman you've been married to less than a year, legal ownership of half your empire? Yes. That's insane. It's strategic. It's financial suicide. Voss, I understand you're angry about the trial, but making rash decisions, this isn't rash. I've been thinking about it for weeks. Caleb leaned forward. Every attack on Naomi has been based on the idea that she's using me, stealing from me, manipulating me for my money. Well, if she already owns half of everything legally, that narrative falls apart. She can't be accused of stealing what's already hers. Webb rubbed his temples. Or it proves she's been manipulating you successfully. Caleb, no man in his right mind gives a woman this kind of power. Alors, but then I'm not in my right mind. Draw up the papers. The other ranchers will crucify you for this. Your business partners will walk away. You'll be seen as weak, controlled, unfit. I don't care. You should care. Your reputation is the foundation of everything you've built. Caleb stood and walked to the window, looking out at land he'd fought for, bled for, killed himself to acquire. I spent 20 years building a reputation as the meanest son of a bitch in Montana. Know what that got me? A house full of people who feared me and an empire I was building for nobody. Then I married a woman for $1, and she gave me something I didn't even know I needed. What's that? A reason to care about something other than winning. Webb was quiet for a long moment. You love her. That's not relevant. It's the only thing that's relevant. You're not doing this strategically. You're doing this because you've fallen in love with your wife and you want to protect her. Caleb didn't answer, which was answer enough. Webb sighed and pulled out his notebook. When do you want the transfer to take effect? Immediately, before the baby comes. I want it done, legal, and filed with the territory before anyone can object. They'll object anyway. Let them. By the time they finish objecting, it'll be too late. The papers were drawn up within a week. Caleb signed them in his office with Naomi watching, her expression unreadable. You don't have to do this, she said when Webb left to file the documents. I know. People will say I forced you, that I've been controlling you all along. They already say that. This will make it worse, or it'll make it irrelevant. He handed her the deed to the main house. You're not my employee, Naomi. You're not my housekeeper or my property or my burden. You're my partner. This just makes it official. She looked at the document in her hands, at her name written in legal script beside his. Half of everything. Should have been half from the beginning. Most men would never. I'm not most men, and you're not most women. We've established that. She set the deed on the desk carefully, like it might break. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. Just keep being exactly who you are and let me worry about the consequences. The consequences are going to be severe. I've survived worse. He hadn't actually, but he was about to find out just how bad things could get. The news spread across the territory like wildfire. Caleb Voss had transferred half his ranch to his wife. The auction bride now owned a fortune. The woman who'd been bought for $1 controlled one of the largest operations in Montana. The reaction was immediate and vicious. 3 of his largest business partners terminated their contracts within days. Suppliers who'd worked with him for years suddenly had concerns about payment reliability. Other ranchers started spreading rumors that Voss Ranch was financially unstable, controlled by a woman who didn't know what she was doing. The bank in Helena called in 2 of his loans early, citing risk concerns. Caleb handled each blow methodically, finding new partners, negotiating new terms, restructuring debt. But it was like fighting a flood with a bucket. Every problem he solved created 2 more, and through it all, Naomi grew bigger, slower, more exhausted. The pregnancy was taking a toll. The doctor visited weekly now, increasingly concerned about her blood pressure, her swelling, her overall health. The stress isn't helping, he told Caleb privately. She needs rest, calm, stability. What she's getting is the opposite. I know. If this continues, we could lose both her and the baby. The words hit Caleb like a physical blow. What do I do? Get her away from here. Take her somewhere quiet where she can actually rest without the weight of this entire territory judging her every move. But there was nowhere to go. The ranch needed them both. The business was hemorrhaging from the backlash of the property transfer, and Naomi refused to leave anyway. I'm not running, she said when Caleb suggested a trip to stay with distant relatives. I'm not giving them the satisfaction. This isn't about satisfaction. It's about keeping you alive. I'm fine. You're not fine. You can barely walk without getting winded. You haven't slept properly in weeks. The doctor says, the doctor is worried because that's his job, but I'm tougher than I look. That's not the point. Then what is the point, Caleb? She turned to face him,
hands on her swollen belly. You want me to hide? Prove everyone right that I'm too weak to handle what we built together? That was the whole point of the transfer, wasn't it? To show I'm your equal? The point was to protect you. I don't need protection. I need you to trust that I can handle this. I do trust you. He stopped, struggling with words that didn't come naturally. I can't lose you. Her expression softened. You're not going to lose me. You don't know that. No, but I know that if I spend the next 2 months hiding in bed, I'll go insane. Let me work. Let me keep doing what I'm good at. Let me feel useful instead of fragile. He wanted to argue, wanted to lock her in her room until the baby came and damn the consequences. But he'd married her for her strength, not despite it. Trying to take that strength away now would destroy what they'd built together. Fine, he said, but you're working half days. You're sitting down whenever possible. And if the doctor says stop, you stop. Deal. They shook hands like they had the night they met. Two stubborn people making a bargain neither was sure they could keep. October came with frost and falling leaves and the knowledge that time was running out. Naomi moved through the house like a ship at sea, her body no longer her own, her movements careful and deliberate. The baby was due any day now. Caleb found himself watching her constantly, terrified every time she winced or gasped or pressed her hand to her back. The doctor had taken up residence in one of the guest rooms, ready for when labor started. It started on a Tuesday night. Caleb woke to Naomi standing beside his bed, her face pale in the moonlight. It's time, she said quietly. He was dressed and shouting for the doctor before she finished the sentence. The labor lasted 18 hours. Caleb paced the hallway outside her room while the doctor worked, listening to her scream and cry and curse his name. Other women had attended births before. He'd heard stories, but nothing prepared him for the reality of hearing someone he loved in that kind of pain. You should wait downstairs, the doctor's assistant said, emerging with bloody towels. This could take a while longer. How much longer? No way to know. First babies are unpredictable. Is she... He couldn't finish the question. She's strong. She's fighting. That's all we can ask for. But fighting sounded too much like losing, and Caleb found himself praying to things he didn't believe in, making bargains with whatever forces controlled life and death. Take me instead. Let her live. Let them both live, and I'll give up everything else. The sun was rising when he finally heard it, a thin, reedy cry that cut through the house like a knife. The doctor appeared in the doorway, exhausted but smiling. You have a son. Caleb's legs almost gave out. And Naomi? Alive. Weak, but alive. She lost a lot of blood. The next few days will be critical. He pushed past the doctor into the room. Naomi lay in the bed, her skin pale as paper, her hair plastered to her forehead with sweat. But she was holding a tiny, screaming bundle wrapped in blankets, and she was smiling. We have a son, she said hoarsely. Caleb crossed to the bed and looked down at the baby, wrinkled, red, impossibly small, absolutely perfect. Caleb couldn't find words. Loud, Naomi finished, just like his father. I'm not loud. You ordered 3 people around in the last 30 seconds. That's different. The baby squirmed in Naomi's arms, tiny fists waving. Caleb reached out hesitantly and touched one miniature hand. The baby's fingers wrapped around his thumb with surprising strength. Something in Caleb's chest broke open. What do we name him? Naomi asked. They'd discussed names for weeks but never decided on anything. Now, looking at his son, Caleb knew. Thomas, he said, after your first husband. Naomi's eyes widened. What? No, Caleb. He was part of your life, part of what made you who you are. I'm not going to pretend he didn't exist. He divorced me for being barren. And he was wrong. Let this be proof of that. Let our son carry the name and turn it into something better than what it was. She was crying, tears running down her exhausted face. You're sure? I'm sure. Thomas Voss, she said softly, testing it. It sounds right. It is right. They sat together in the quiet dawn, a family for the first time. While outside the window, the ranch woke to the news that the impossible had happened. The barren woman had given birth. The recovery was brutal. For 3 days, Naomi drifted in and out of consciousness, fighting fever and blood loss. The doctor stayed constantly, changing bandages, monitoring her breathing, administering treatments that seemed to help and then didn't.
Caleb barely left her side. He held her hand through the worst of it, whispered things he'd never said before, promised things he had no power to guarantee. On the fourth day, she opened her eyes and they stayed open. "You look terrible," she said, her voice rough. "So do you." "Is the baby?" "Thomas is fine. The cook's been feeding him with a bottle. He's loud and healthy and completely oblivious to the fact that his mother almost died bringing him into the world." "Good." She closed her eyes again. "That's good. Don't do that again." "Do what?" "Almost die. I can handle a lot of things, Naomi, but I can't handle that." She squeezed his hand weakly. "I'll try to avoid it. Try harder." But even as she recovered, the doctor pulled Caleb aside with news that changed everything. "The bleeding damaged her internally," he said bluntly. "There's scarring. She may never carry another child, and if she does, another pregnancy would likely kill her." Caleb felt the world tilt. "You're sure?" "As sure as I can be without cutting her open to look, which I won't do. But yes, I'm very sure. One child is probably all you're going to get." That night, Caleb sat in the nursery holding Thomas while Naomi slept. The baby was a week old, still tiny and fragile, but already showing signs of personality. Stubborn, loud, demanding attention on his own schedule. "You're going to be it," Caleb told him quietly. "The only one. Which means you better be good, because we're not getting a chance to practice on anyone else first." Thomas made a noise that might have been agreement or gas. Hard to tell with babies. "Your mother almost died for you, you know that. She fought for 18 hours to bring you into this world, then fought 4 more days to stay in it. I don't know if people remember being born, but if you do, remember that. Remember that you were wanted so badly she risked everything." The baby yawned, unimpressed. "Yeah, well, you'll understand someday. When you're older and you realize what it means to love something more than your own life. Until then, try not to scream quite so much at 3 in the morning." Behind him, Naomi's voice came from the doorway. "Talking to himself already. Must be your son." Caleb turned. She was leaning against the frame, still pale but standing on her own. "You should be in bed." "I've been in bed for a week. I wanted to see you two." She crossed slowly to the chair beside him. "What were you telling him?" "That he's going to be an only child." "The doctor told you." "He told me." Naomi reached out and touched Thomas's tiny hand. "I'm sorry." "For what?" "For only giving you one heir. I know you wanted... I wanted you alive. I got that. Everything else is extra." "Caleb, I mean it." He looked at her directly. "I married you thinking I needed an heir to continue the empire. But watching you almost die made me realize the empire doesn't matter if you're not here. Thomas matters because he's ours. But if we'd lost him and kept you, I would have survived that. If we'd lost you..." He stopped, throat tight. "I wouldn't have survived that." She leaned against him, careful of the baby between them. "When did you get so sentimental?" "Probably around the time I married someone for $1, and it turned into the best decision I ever made." "Second best. Transferring half your property was pretty good too." "That was the same decision, just delayed." They sat together in the quiet nursery while Thomas slept between them, a tiny person who had no idea he'd just survived something impossible and entered a world that would judge him for his mother's past. But he had time to learn, and he had parents who'd fight like hell to give him better than what they'd gotten. 3 weeks after Thomas's birth, Caleb made an announcement that shocked the territory even more than the property transfer. He was stepping back from day-to-day ranch operations. Naomi would be managing the horse breeding program entirely. He would handle larger business strategy and contracts, but the actual running of the ranch would fall to her and a team of managers they'd select together. "You're making your wife the boss," Dutch Morrison said when he heard, "over men who've worked ranches their whole lives." "I'm putting the most qualified person in charge," Caleb corrected. "The fact that she's my wife is irrelevant." "It's not irrelevant to the men who'll have to take orders from her. Then those men can find work elsewhere. Naomi's earned this position. She rebuilt operations I didn't even realize were broken. She's not getting promoted because I love her. She's getting promoted because she's better at it than I am." The word spread quickly. Reactions ranged from outrage to fascination to grudging respect from workers who'd seen Naomi's results firsthand. Several men quit. Caleb let them go without argument, but others stayed. And as the weeks passed and the horse program continued improving under Naomi's direct management, Even the skeptics had to admit the results spoke for themselves. By Christmas, Voss Ranch was producing higher quality breeding stock than ever before. Orders were coming in from across 3 territories. The operation that had been profitable was now exceptional, and Naomi was the reason why. She worked with Thomas strapped to her back in a sling the cook had made, the baby sleeping peacefully while his mother negotiated with suppliers and planned breeding schedules. It should have looked ridiculous, a woman doing business with an infant attached to her body. Instead, it looked like strength. One afternoon in February, Caleb found her in the barn teaching 2 younger workers about bloodline evaluation. Thomas was awake, watching everything with wide, curious eyes, while Naomi explained genetic traits and pairing strategies. And you never want to breed 2 horses with the same structural weakness, she was saying. Even if they're both excellent in other areas, that weakness will compound in the offspring. You're looking for complementary strengths, not doubled greatness. Doubled greatness usually means doubled problems too. One of the workers asked a question about a specific mare. Naomi answered without hesitation, then noticed Caleb watching. "Did you need something?" she asked. "Just watching my wife work." "That sounds vaguely creepy when you say it like that." The workers laughed. Thomas made a gurgling sound that might have been laughter too. After the lesson ended, Caleb walked with Naomi back to the house. "You're good at this," he said. "I know. Not just the work, the teaching. Those men respect you. Some of them. Others still think I'm an uppity woman who got lucky marrying you. What do you think?" She adjusted Thomas's sling. "I think I'm an uppity woman who worked her ass off and earned everything I have. The marriage was lucky. What I built from it wasn't." Fair assessment. They reached the house and Naomi handed Thomas to the cook, who'd been waiting to feed him. Once the baby was settled, Naomi turned to Caleb with an expression he'd learned to recognize. She had an idea, and he probably wasn't going to like it. "What?" he asked warily. "I want to start teaching other women." "Teaching them what?" "Everything. Ranch management, finances, breeding programs, how to run operations. There are women across this territory being told they're only good for cooking and babies. I want to show them they're wrong. That's going to make enemies. I already have enemies. Might as well make them for a good reason. Naomi, I'm not asking permission. I'm telling you what I'm going to do, but I thought you should hear it from me first before the complaints start rolling in." Caleb looked at his wife, this impossible woman who'd survived poverty, humiliation, a brutal trial, and childbirth that almost killed her, and still wanted to fight for people she didn't even know. "You're going to change the world," he said. "I'm going to try. It's going to be hard. Everything worth doing is hard. And you'll have my support, whatever you need." She smiled, that rare, genuine smile that still hit him like lightning. "I know, that's why I married you. I thought you married me for survival." "That too. Turns out it was a package deal." She kissed him, quick and casual, then headed inside to reclaim their son from the cook. Caleb stood alone in the yard, watching smoke rise from the bunkhouse chimneys, watching his empire continue its daily rhythm, and realized something profound. He'd spent 20 years building this place because he had nothing else to build. No family, no legacy, no future beyond accumulating more land and more money because that's what powerful men did. Now he had a wife who challenged him, a son who needed him, and a purpose beyond his own ambition. The empire wasn't gone. But it wasn't the point anymore. The point was what they were building together, something that would outlast both of them and matter to people beyond themselves. That night at dinner, Naomi outlined her plans for the teaching program. She'd start small, just a few women from neighboring ranches. Basic skills first, reading contracts, managing household accounts, understanding livestock value. "If it works," she said, "we expand. Eventually, maybe we turn part of the ranch into an actual school. A school for women to learn ranching. A school for women to learn business, ranching, trading, finance, anything that lets them be independent." Thomas started crying from the other room. Naomi stood to get him, but Caleb waved her back down. "I'll get him. Finish your plans." He found Thomas in his cradle, tiny face scrunched in indignation. Caleb picked him up and carried him to the window, bouncing him gently. "Your mother's going to change everything," he told the baby. "And you're going to grow up thinking that's normal. That women can run businesses and manage operations and be equals. You won't even realize how rare that is because for you, it'll just be how things are." Thomas grabbed his finger, apparently satisfied with this explanation. You're lucky, Caleb continued. You get to grow up watching what real partnership looks like, what it means when two people fight together instead of against each other. Your mother and I, we didn't start with love. We started with honesty, but it turned into something better than anything I could have planned. The baby yawned, unimpressed as always. Caleb laughed and carried him back to Naomi, who took him with practiced ease and began nursing him while simultaneously making notes about curriculum structure. She was extraordinary. And for the first time in his entire life, Caleb Voss felt like he'd built something that actually mattered. The years rolled forward with the relentless momentum of a river carving through stone. Thomas grew from an infant into a stubborn toddler who climbed everything and questioned everything else. The teaching program Naomi started with 3 nervous women from neighboring ranches expanded to 15, then 30, then so many they had to build an actual schoolhouse on the property. And then, impossibly, Naomi got pregnant again. She was 35 and the doctor had said another pregnancy would kill her, but her body apparently hadn't received that message. When she told Caleb, he went completely white. You can't, he said flatly. I don't think I get a choice in whether I'm pregnant or not. That decision's already been made. Then will... He stopped, because there wasn't a will in this situation. There was only what was already happening. The doctor says if I'm careful, if I rest more, there's a chance. Naomi's hand went to her still flat stomach. A small chance, but a chance. And if you're not careful, then I die and you raise 2 children alone. The bluntness of it hit him like a fist. That's not funny. It's not meant to be funny. It's meant to be honest. She crossed to where he stood frozen in the middle of their bedroom. I'm not planning to die, Caleb, but I'm also not planning to spend 9 months pretending this isn't dangerous. So we need to decide right now. Are we going to be terrified every single day, or are we going to trust that I'm strong enough to survive this? I vote terrified. I vote trust. You don't get a vote. It's your life. Exactly. It's my life, and I'm choosing to believe I'll live through it. She took his hands. I need you to believe it too. Because if you spend the next 9 months looking at me like I'm already dead, I won't survive the fear even if I survive the birth. He pulled her close, held her like she might disappear if he loosened his grip even slightly. I can't lose you. You won't. You can't promise that. No, but I can promise I'll fight like hell, same as I've fought everything else. The second pregnancy was harder than the first. Naomi was older, her body still scarred from Thomas's birth, and the morning sickness was vicious. She spent the first 3 months barely keeping food down, teaching classes from a chair because standing made her dizzy. But she kept teaching, kept working, kept refusing to act like she was made of glass. Thomas, now 3 years old, seemed to understand something important was happening, even if he couldn't articulate what. He became gentler around his mother, patting her stomach and asking if the baby was sleeping in there. Something like that, Naomi told him. When does it come out? A few more months. That's too long. I want to play with it now. Babies aren't for playing with. They're for protecting. Thomas considered this seriously. Like how Papa protects you? Exactly like that. The boy nodded, satisfied with this explanation, and went back to building block towers that he immediately destroyed. In her 6th month, Naomi gave birth to a daughter. It happened fast. Too fast. She was teaching a class on contract negotiation when her water broke. The baby came 3 hours later, small and early, and screaming with the indignation of someone forced out of a warm place into a cold world. She's tiny, Caleb said, holding the impossibly small bundle while the doctor examined Naomi. She's a fighter, Naomi corrected, exhausted but alive. Look at her, already angry at everything. The baby did look angry, red-faced, fists waving, completely unimpressed with her surroundings. What do we name her? Caleb asked. They'd argued about this for months. Caleb wanted something traditional. Naomi wanted something that meant something. Margaret, Naomi said now, after my mother, but we'll call her Maggie. Your mother died when you were young, which is why I want to remember her. She was strong, stronger than anyone gave her credit for. I want our daughter to have that strength. Caleb looked down at tiny Maggie, who'd stopped screaming and was now staring at him with unfocused eyes that would eventually turn the same dark brown as her mother's. Maggie Voss, he said. It fits. The recovery this time was somehow worse and better, simultaneously. Naomi didn't have the bleeding and fever that nearly killed her after Thomas, but her body was simply worn down. The doctor was blunt about it. No more children. Her body couldn't handle it. Another pregnancy would absolutely be fatal. 2 is a good number, Naomi said when Caleb brought her the news she already knew. 1 to run the ranch, 1 to run everything else. You're assuming they'll want to run anything.
Have you met our children? Thomas already tried to reorganize the kitchen staff yesterday. He's 3. Maggie screams until she gets exactly what she wants. They're not going to be passive.
She was right. As the years passed and the children grew, their personalities solidified into something undeniable. Thomas was stubborn, intelligent, and obsessed with how things worked. He followed the ranch hands around asking endless questions, took apart anything with moving parts, and started reading ledgers by the time he was 6.
Maggie was fierce. By the time she was 4, she was climbing fences the boys twice her age were afraid of, demanding to be taught everything her brother learned, and throwing spectacular tantrums when told girls didn't do certain things. Who told you girls don't do things? Naomi asked after one particularly impressive meltdown. Jacob's mother said girls should learn sewing, not ranching. Jacob's mother is wrong. Girls can learn whatever they want. Then I want to learn everything.
That's going to take a while.
I don't care. I want to know everything Thomas knows. So Naomi taught her. Both children together, learning ranch management and business and mathematics and everything else Naomi had taught herself over years of necessity. The teaching program for women continued expanding. By the time Thomas was 7 and Maggie was 4, they had 40 women coming regularly to learn. Some traveled from over 100 miles away. They learned bookkeeping, livestock management, legal contracts, negotiation tactics, everything they needed to be independent. The backlash was constant. Men complained that Naomi was ruining good women, putting ideas in their heads, destroying the natural order. Wives who'd been submissive started questioning their husbands' decisions. Daughters started refusing to marry men who wouldn't treat them as equals. "You're destroying society," one rancher told Caleb during a business meeting. "I'm improving it," Caleb corrected. "Educated women make better partners, better mothers, better business minds. You're just angry because you can't control them anymore." Control has nothing to do with it. Control is the only thing it has to do with. You're threatened because women are realizing they don't need to accept whatever scraps men give them. They can demand more, be more, and that terrifies you. The rancher left without signing the contract he'd come to negotiate. Caleb didn't care. He had enough business from people who valued results over tradition. When Thomas was 10, something shifted in him. He started asking questions about the future, about legacy, about what would happen to the ranch when Caleb died. "You're 10, Caleb said. "You shouldn't be thinking about death." "But you're old. You're going to die eventually." "Thanks for the reminder. I just want to know what happens. Does the ranch go to me, to Maggie, both of us?" Caleb looked at his son, serious, analytical, already thinking like a businessman despite being a child. "Why does it matter?" "Because I want to be ready. I want to know what I'm supposed to do." "You're supposed to be a child. The ranch will still be here when you're old enough to run it." But Thomas wasn't satisfied with that answer, and Caleb realized his son was already carrying the weight of expectations that had crushed other men. That night, he talked to Naomi about it. "He's too young to be worrying about legacy," Caleb said. "He's your son. Legacy is in his blood." Naomi was mending a shirt, her hands moving with practiced efficiency. "You spent your whole life building an empire. He's watching you do it. Of course he thinks that's what he's supposed to do, too. I don't want him to make the same mistakes I did." "Then tell him that." "Tell him what?" "That the empire doesn't matter as much as the people in it. That success without partnership is just expensive loneliness. That the best decision you ever made was marrying someone who challenged you instead of someone who agreed with everything you said." She looked up from her mending. "Tell him the truth about what actually made your life worth living." Caleb found Thomas in the barn the next day, studying a mare's pregnant belly like it contained the secrets of the universe. "She's going to foal soon," Thomas said without looking up. "Maybe tonight." "Probably." Caleb leaned against the stall door. "Can I tell you something? Is it about responsibility and legacy and preparing for the future?" "Sort of. It's about making the same mistakes I did." Thomas looked up, interested now. "What mistakes?"
I spent 20 years thinking success meant being the richest, most powerful man in Montana. I thought if I accumulated enough land and money and respect, I'd matter, that my life would mean something. Did it work? No, I was miserable, rich and powerful and completely alone, because I'd built walls so high nobody could get close enough to actually know me. Then what changed? I married your mother for $1 and she tore down every single wall I'd ever built. Caleb sat down on a hay bale. Thomas, I need you to understand something. The ranch is important. The business is important. But they're not the point. The point is what you build with other people, the partnerships you form, the family you create, the way you treat people who can't do anything for you. Mom says that all the time. Your mother is smarter than me. Listen to her. I already do. Thomas sat down beside his father. But what if I want to run the ranch? What if I'm good at it? Then you'll run it. But run it because you love the work, not because you're trying to prove something, and find someone to run it with you. A partner who'll tell you when you're wrong and celebrate when you're right. That's what makes the difference between success and just being good at making money. Thomas was quiet, processing this. Did you know Mom would be that person when you married her? No, I just knew she was honest. Everything else was luck and her refusing to let me be the same miserable bastard I'd been for 20 years. You're not a bastard. I used to be. Your mother fixed that too. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the pregnant mare shift in her stall. The foal is coming tonight, Thomas said again. How do you know? Because Mom taught me the signs. She's been restless all day, won't eat, keeps looking at her sides. Baby's coming. He was right. The foal arrived just after midnight, a strong, healthy colt that was on its feet within an hour. Thomas stayed up all night watching it, taking notes in the journal Naomi had given him for tracking breeding outcomes. Caleb watched his son work and thought about legacy. Not the land or money or reputation kind of legacy. The kind that mattered. Children who knew how to work hard and love hard and treat people like they deserved dignity. That was the real empire. And it was one he and Naomi had built together. The years continued their march. Thomas grew into a lean, serious teenager who could analyze bloodlines better than most professional breeders. Maggie grew into a fierce 12-year-old who announced she wanted to be a doctor and refused to accept any explanation for why that was impossible. Women can't be doctors, one of the visiting ranchers told her. Why not? Because they just can't. It's not proper. That's not a reason. That's just you being scared of women who are smarter than you. The rancher sputtered. Naomi, overhearing, didn't intervene. Maggie fought her own battles. And then one afternoon, the past came calling in an unexpected way. Caleb was in his office when the housekeeper announced a visitor, a woman who said she'd known Naomi years ago and wanted to speak with her. The woman who entered was weathered and nervous, wearing clothes that had seen better days. It took Caleb a moment to recognize her. She'd been at the auction the night he bought Naomi, one of the other women in that degrading line. "I'm Sarah," she said. "I don't know if Naomi remembers me." "I remember." Both of them turned. Naomi stood in the doorway, her expression unreadable. Sarah twisted her hands together. "I heard about your teaching program, about how you're helping women learn business and ranching. I wanted to—" She stopped, started again. "I've been in a bad situation for 8 years, married to a man who drinks and hits and takes every penny I make. I finally left him last month. I have nothing. No money, no skills, nowhere to go. But I heard you were teaching women how to be independent, and I thought maybe—" She didn't finish. Didn't need to. Naomi crossed the room and took Sarah's hands. "You're staying here. We have room. You'll learn everything we can teach you, and when you're ready, we'll help you start over." Sarah started crying. "I can't pay." "I don't want payment. I want you to survive. That's enough." Over the next month, 6 more women showed up with similar stories. Women fleeing bad marriages, abusive situations, poverty that had trapped them in cycles they couldn't break. Naomi took them all in. The ranch became something more than a business. It became a refuge, a place where women who'd been told they were worthless came to discover they were capable of extraordinary things. Caleb watched it happen with a mixture of pride and amazement. The woman he'd bought for $1 was changing lives one person at a time, building something that would outlast both of them. Then his health started failing. It happened gradually. Caleb was 63, and the years of hard work were catching up. His joints ached. His breathing got harder. Some mornings he couldn't get out of bed without help.
The doctor was honest. Your heart is wearing out. You need to slow down. Retire. Let someone else run the ranch. Someone else already runs it, Caleb said. I've just been pretending I'm still necessary. But slowing down meant facing mortality, and Caleb wasn't ready for that conversation. Naomi forced it anyway. You're dying, she said one night, sitting beside his bed where he'd been confined for 3 days with chest pains. Eventually, not immediately. Don't play semantics with me. Your heart is failing. The doctor says you have maybe 5 years if you're lucky. We need to talk about what happens next. Thomas takes over the ranch. Maggie goes to medical school if she still wants to. You continue the teaching program. Life goes on. And what about us? Caleb looked at her, still beautiful despite the gray in her hair and the lines around her eyes, still strong despite everything life had thrown at her. What about us? We've been married 20 years, Caleb. 20 years of partnership and fighting and building something that actually matters. And now you're dying, and I don't know how to do this without you. Her voice broke on the last word. He pulled her close, ignoring the protest from his failing heart. You've been doing it without me for years. You don't need me to keep going. That's not the same as not wanting you here. I know. They held each other in the quiet darkness. Two people who'd started as strangers and become something far more complicated and essential than either had expected. I love you, Caleb said. He'd said it before, but not often. The words didn't come easily to him. I know, Naomi said. You loved me when you transferred half the ranch into my name. You loved me when you defended me in that courtroom. You loved me when you held me through labor and recovery and every hard thing that came after. I've always known. But I should say it more. Yes, you should, but I'll forgive the oversight if you promise to stay alive long enough to meet your grandchildren. Thomas is 19. He's not having children anytime soon. He's courting that Miller girl, the one who's been taking my classes. They'll be married within 2 years. I guarantee it. She was right. Thomas married Caroline Miller when he was 21, and their first child, a girl they named Naomi, arrived 10 months later. Caleb held his granddaughter and felt time collapse. This tiny person connected to him through blood and legacy, proof that everything he and Naomi had built would continue past them. She looks like you, he told Naomi. She looks like trouble, just like her grandmother. Baby Naomi grabbed Caleb's finger and held on tight. Maggie, now 17, leaned over to look at her niece. I'm still going to medical school. Nobody said you weren't, Thomas said. Just making sure everyone remembers, because some people... She glared at a visiting rancher who'd made comments earlier. Seem to think marriage and babies are the only options for women. Nobody thinks that, Naomi said mildly. Everyone thinks that except you, Mama. Then prove them wrong, same as I did. Maggie grinned. That's the plan. She left for medical school the following year, one of 3 women in a class of 40 men. The university tried to refuse her admission. Caleb made a donation large enough that they reconsidered. You're buying her way in, Naomi said. I'm removing obstacles. She'll prove herself once she's there. And she did. Maggie graduated near the top of her class, came home, and immediately started establishing medical clinics across the territory for people who couldn't afford traditional doctors. Where's she getting the money for this? Caleb asked. From me, Naomi said. I'm investing ranch profits in her clinics. It's a better use than expanding operations we don't need to expand. You're using my money to fund our daughter's medical revolution. Our money. I own half, remember? And yes, that's exactly what I'm doing. Object if you want. He didn't object. Watching Maggie work, watching Thomas run the ranch with a combination of Caleb's business sense and Naomi's people skills, watching the teaching program graduate women who went on to run their own operations, it was all proof that they'd built something that mattered. Caleb's health continued declining. By the time he was 68, he could barely leave bed. The doctor said it was a matter of months now, not years. Naomi spent every night beside him, holding his hand, telling him stories about their life together. Remember when you bid $1 on me? She said one night. Hard to forget. Everyone laughed. They thought you were insulting me. Turns out you were making the best investment of your life. Best dollar I ever spent. You got a ranch manager, a business partner, 2 children, and a revolution out of it. Not bad for pocket change. He smiled, though it hurt to smile. Everything hurt now. What did you get? Everything I never let myself want. Partnership, respect, children.
a chance to change things for women who came after me. She touched his face. And love, even if you were too stubborn to say it for the first 5 years, I said it. You said it eventually. Better late than never. They were quiet for a while, listening to the night sounds of the ranch, horses moving in their stalls, wind through the trees, the distant sound of voices from the bunkhouses. I'm afraid, Caleb said finally, of dying, of leaving you alone, of not being here to see what comes next. You'll never really leave. You're in Thomas's stubbornness and Maggie's determination. You're in the way this ranch operates and the way we treat people. You're in every decision we make based on partnership instead of control. She leaned her forehead against his. You changed me, Caleb, made me believe I was worth more than the dollar you paid. I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving you right. He died 3 weeks later, peacefully in his sleep with Naomi beside him. The funeral was massive. People came from across 3 territories to pay respects to the man who'd built an empire and then given half of it to his wife, who'd supported women's education when everyone said it would destroy society, who'd been feared and respected and, by the end, genuinely loved. Naomi stood at the grave and didn't cry. She'd done her crying in private. In public, she was steel. He was a hard man who learned to be soft, she told the crowd. A ruthless businessman who learned that partnership mattered more than profit, and he was the best husband I could have asked for, even if neither of us knew what we were doing when we started. People laughed softly. He bid $1 on me when nobody else would. Everyone thought he was crazy or cruel or both, but he saw something in me that I'd stopped seeing in myself. Worth. Potential. The capacity to be more than my circumstances had made me. She paused. I'm going to honor his memory by continuing the work we started together, by teaching women that their worth isn't determined by what men are willing to pay for them, by building something that lasts beyond individual lives. She stepped back from the grave, and they lowered Caleb Voss into the Montana earth he'd spent a lifetime controlling and protecting. The years after Caleb's death were hard in ways Naomi hadn't anticipated. Not because she couldn't run the operation, she'd been running it for years, but because partnership mattered and losing your partner left a hole that work couldn't fill. She was 62 when Caleb died. She lived another 18 years, growing old and stubborn and more determined than ever to change the world she'd been born into. The teaching program expanded beyond anything they'd originally envisioned. By the time Naomi was 70, they had 5 permanent schools across Montana and Wyoming teaching women ranching, business, medicine, law, everything they needed to be independent. Thomas ran the ranch with the same combination of shrewdness and fairness his parents had modeled. He raised 3 children who all went on to do remarkable things. Maggie established 15 medical clinics and trained 24 women doctors who faced constant opposition but persisted anyway. And Naomi kept teaching until her body wouldn't let her anymore. When reporters came to interview her, and they did, increasingly, as her reputation grew, they always asked the same question. How does it feel to be known as the dollar bride? Accurate, Naomi said. I was bought for $1. I'm not ashamed of it. I turned that dollar into a fortune and a family and a movement that's changed thousands of lives. If that's embarrassing, the embarrassment belongs to everyone who thought a woman's worth could be measured in currency. Do you have any regrets? Hundreds. I regret not believing in myself sooner. I regret the years I spent accepting what other people said about me instead of defining myself. I regret every woman I couldn't help because I didn't start this work earlier. She paused. But I don't regret marrying Caleb Voss. That $1 marriage was the smartest business decision either of us ever made. Was it love? Eventually, but it was partnership first, and that turned out to be more important. Love is wonderful when you have it. Partnership is essential. We built everything on partnership. The love came later, after we'd already proven we could work together. What do you want your legacy to be? Naomi thought about this carefully. I want people to remember that worth isn't something others assign you. It's something you claim for yourself. I was called barren, damaged, worthless. None of it was true. But I only discovered that when someone gave me a chance to prove it, and more importantly, when I decided to prove it to myself. She died at 80, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who'd grown up thinking it was normal for women to run businesses and attend medical school and demand equality. Her funeral was even bigger than Caleb's. Women came from across the West. Women she'd taught, women those women had taught, generations of ranchers and doctors and businesswomen who traced their success back to the school Naomi Voss had built from nothing. They buried her beside Caleb, and the headstone read simply, Naomi Hale Voss, 1872 to 1952. Worth more than $1. Years later, historians would debate the accuracy of her story. Some said it was exaggerated, that no single woman could have accomplished that much. Others said it couldn't have happened the way she described. Society wouldn't have allowed it. But the evidence was undeniable. The schools existed. The businesses existed. The women who'd trained under her existed and had built empires of their own. And in a museum in Helena, they kept the original marriage certificate, the document that proved Caleb Voss had married Naomi Hale after bidding $1 at an auction in 1903. $1. The worst investment the frontier ever tried to make. The best investment that turned into a revolution nobody saw coming. Because sometimes the most valuable things in life aren't the ones that cost the most. They're the ones nobody else wanted. The ones society discarded. The ones that get a chance despite impossible odds. Naomi Voss proved that. She lived it. And she spent her life making sure other women knew it too. The frontier tried to sell a broken woman for $1. Instead, it accidentally created a legend who proved that worth isn't bought or sold. It's earned, claimed, and fought for every single day until the world has no choice but to recognize it. And that truth outlived everyone who tried to deny it.